You're listening to Ordinary Eccentrics. I'm Courtney Lofton, and together we'll uncover the extraordinary lives of ordinary people. Let's hop into it. Hello.
Hey, it's Theresa. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Absolutely.
So we'll start. If you want to give a quick introduction of yourself, including first and last name.
Sure. Is that all you want me to do? Is just the first and last name?
Yeah, you could. That's where we can start. Yeah.
All right. I am Theresa Olson. I live in North Carolina. I'm 53 years old.
Amazing. And where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in a very little town called Johnson Creek, Wisconsin, in between Madison and Milwaukee. And then from there, all over. My mom is a British citizen, born and raised in London. So we went back and forth, England and America after my parents got divorced. So I'm kind of from all over, but mostly Wisconsin.
Nice. I'm from the Midwest too. I'm from Illinois.
Oh, nice. Okay. So
Yeah.
last 20 years has been Kenosha. So that's real close to the
Okay.
border.
Nice. What was it like growing up with a parent, like I guess like an international parent? Do you feel like you had a different childhood than like a typical American child or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Like for starters, I mean, we grew up on British television. My mom hardly ever
Oh,
watched any American shows. So we just kind of, we didn't, up until I think I was in middle school, I didn't even know there was other shows. She just always had like PBS and British shows on. Um, and BBC and all that, whatever she could get
yeah.
from Britain. And we had Sunday dinners, which is very traditional for British people.
Hmm.
So we always had Sunday dinners no matter what. That was like, a big dinner. And then, which, was not common for most of my friends. They're like, why do you always have a big dinner on Sunday? Um, and then the other thing was tea. I mean, a cup of tea solved all problems. So no matter what tragedy was going on in the family or drama, it was like, quick, everybody put the kettle on.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Did you have a strong connection then to the UK growing up?
I did. Yeah. We would go back and, my mom always made sure there was budget money. She was a single parent. My dad wasn't really much involved. They met when he was stationed over there in the military. And so they got married very young and then divorced when I was young. And he moved away. But so she would always make sure she budgeted money to go to England. So we usually went like every 2 or 3 years.
Mm.
And then my fourth grade year, I started school there. And then I went back as a freshman and was supposed to start school there, but then we ended up coming back. So, but when I turned 18, I moved over there for about 3 years. So I
Oh,
spent from
wow.
like 18 to 21 there.
And then, well, were you there then from fourth grade to high school?
No, just fourth grade. And then we came back and went to school. I went to school back in Wisconsin. Um,
What was it like with like culture shift at such a young age, like going to a school in a totally different country? Like, did
it
different? Like, what was it like?
it was actually, they were quite a bit far, they were much further advanced than American schools. Number one, they don't have, their summers off. They only get like 2 or 3 weeks in the summer. And then there's no thing as kindergarten. So you're kind of starting, well, they have a kindergarten, obviously, but it's a little bit more advanced. It seems like they start kids at 4, and then no summer break. So by the time, they were doing probably sixth grade stuff in when I was in fourth grade. So that I felt lost
Wow.
the entire year because I hadn't learned some of the elementary things. But it was, and plus it was, London's at the time was the third largest city in the world. So you go from
Yeah.
this tiny little village school to this giant school in London, where you're wearing school uniforms. I mean,
Yeah.
I think all of that was a culture shock. I did kind of like the school uniform thing just because you didn't have to worry about what you were going to wear each day. And
Hmm.
being from, a single income family, we never had a lot of money. So that was actually a little bit of a relief that nobody knew, what kind of socioeconomic family I was from because we were all wearing the same thing. So I
And
remember
were there
always
other? Oh
feeling
yeah, go ahead.
good about that. Huh?
Oh, I was keep going. I'll ask and when you're done. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying, so that was kind of, it was a culture shock at first, but then it was
Yeah,
like, "Hey, I kinda like this. I don't it takes a lot of the pressure off me, making sure I've got cool clothes on."
yeah. Were you the only other American student there, or were there other
No,
students from
just
other
well,
countries?
my sister. So my sister was 2 years older than me,
Okay.
and, but I'm a little bit more of a rebel. They did really weird things like, England is much more open. Like, when we were changing for gym uniform was these ridiculous, they were called knickers basically, and they were brief underwear that the girls had to wear. And what was crazy is that in 4th grade, they wanted, like, everybody was meant to change in one room in front of each other. And that blew my mind, right? Because, Americans are so private, and I just
Yeah.
refused to do it. I was like, yeah, I'm not changing in front of boys, because they're all staring at me to see what the American girl looked like. And and so I went to the bathroom, but I refused to wear the knickers. I said I brought some shorts from home. And my poor sister, who was typically, I mean, she's 2 years older than me, she put on the knickers and was mortified.
Yeah.
And I
So
saw her
you're
and I said, "What are you doing?"
like, this is so weird. I don't even
Yeah, it
remember
was so
changing for
weird.
gym until high school.
Yeah, I know. I mean, changing is one thing. I mean, changing in front of a whole classroom of people and then just having
Yeah.
these little brief underwear as their school uniform was insane in my mind.
So when you came back to America, were you like the cool girl who's like been going to school in the UK and like everything is different?
I don't remember anybody. I think a few people asked me about it. I actually did come back with an English accent. I think when you're younger, it seems to stick with you quicker.
Mhm.
And so I remember the first couple of weeks of we came back in the summer, and hung out with some friends, and they thought I was putting in the accent to
Oh,
to show off, and I was like, no,
yeah.
this is just how I talk now. And then it didn't take long for the American one to stick as well. But I remember people asking me, why are you talking that way?
And it's so funny because you're coming back to Wisconsin, which is a strong accent. Like I'm from Illinois, and some people say I have an accent too. So I'm sure it's really different.
Yeah, very. Yeah, you can definitely tell a Midwest accent, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. It brings me comfort.
Me too.
So tell me about your high school journey, what that was like, and obviously you said you left the States at 18, so were you always visualizing yourself going back to Europe?
I think so. I always saw that as a huge opportunity in education. And
Mhm.
to be real honest, my mom was not being British herself. She grew up. She was like 4 or 5 during World War II with the British bombings, so she
Mm.
remembers a very different life. They had rations up until she was like 12 or 13, still even after the war. So she was very simple and conservative, and just kind of felt kids should just get a job right after high school. So
Mhm.
she was from working class British people, what they would call the East Enders. And so she never, university was only for the wealthy kids. Um, Somewhat like it is here, but it's more of a class system in England. So she never
Mhm.
had university in front of her. So she never put it in front of me. Um, and so I was never really groomed to go to university. So my grades were never,
Mhm.
I just did enough to pass kind of thing.
Mhm.
And yet I had all these friends that were, college bound. So I think England was a little bit of an escape too, like, oh, I'm not ready. I can't do college, but I got to do something with my life.
Yeah.
And so I think it was something I was always going to do, because I knew I was never going to probably make it in college or even have the money for it. So yeah, so starting with my freshman year was like, I just can't, wait to get out of here in this small town kind of thing and go to a big city. And because
Yeah.
I had family there, that just seemed more reasonable to go to London than it would be to another, like, an American big city by myself.
Right.
So I moved there at 18, and I did have, um, I had a well, I didn't have dual citizenship at the time, but I had what's called residency through my mom.
Mhm.
Um, and I was able to work there, get a work visa. And so really just started working, before I got my work visa. I was a barmaid, is what they call them.
Mhm.
worked in a bar and bartended. And then when I got my work visa, I kind of jumped around. I was a travel agent for a little while, and then I worked at the Savoy Hotel, which is a real famous hotel where a lot of celebrities go. So that was really a fun experience. And that's what I did until I came home in 90, I think it was 91.
What brought you home?
Um, I had a bunch I was living with a roommate,
Mhm.
and her and I's lifestyle was very different. I'm again, country bumpkin. And she was, a big London city girl. And we just, her lifestyle was just so different from mine and what she wanted. She was older than me. Um, and I just thought, oh, I don't know if I want to like live in this environment. We lived in not the greatest part of London. Because what happened is I lived with my nan or my grandmother my
Uh-huh.
first year and a half. And then unfortunately my grandmother passed away unexpectedly. And
Mm.
um, the family sold her house or, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I had to move out. And kind of just, she was my boss and I just moved in with her. And she was quite a bit older than me. I think she's like at least 8 to 10 years older than me. So
Oh.
I'm only 19, 20. And I just, after a while, I just thought I need to get home with my family. I felt really disconnected from my siblings. I'm the baby of 6. And
Yeah. Oh, you're the baby of 6, so not just
yeah.
your sister, you have, like, 5 other siblings.
And I had a brother that was married to a British girl, and he was over there.
Uh-huh.
But he was thinking about moving back to the States as well. And so I just thought, well, if he's going to leave, then I'll have nobody, just maybe
Yeah.
cousins that I wasn't that close with. And so that just, yeah, it just was time, I think, to move back home.
Yeah. So did all 6 of you move that first time in 4th grade?
No, just the other ones are older. So it was just me and my
Okay.
sister. So there's 6 of us. The first 4 are like a year apart. So they're kind of like
Oh,
one family. And then there's a 5-year gap. And then there's my sister and me. Um,
okay.
so her and I are only 18 months apart.
Oh, wow, nice. That's like, what was it like growing up with so many siblings?
Actually, being the baby, they all really doted on me,
Yeah.
which is usually unusual. It's not like, like I had at least my oldest sister and then one of my brothers were really, really close. And of course, the one that was 18 months, we were close. I think there
Mhm.
was only one brother. We didn't like each other until I moved to London. And then we kind of got reintroduced to each other because he was 10 years older than me. So when I got over there at 18 and he was 28, married with a baby, we kind of became really, really good friends then. I mean, we hated each other
Mhm.
growing up, and now we're the best of friends. And
Aw.
it started us because we were the only 2 in England.
Yeah.
Um,
And you have end up having, like, an adult relationship as opposed to, like, the sibling rivalry or whatever happens.
Absolutely, because he was a mean guy growing up. And I was like, 8 and he was 18. He was not nice. So to see this new side, this soft side to him, this helpful side, was really refreshing. I was like, "Okay, I can get
Aw,
on board with this guy now."
that's cool. I'm the youngest of 3. I feel like the youngest sibling is always the most rebellious and most independent. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. Yep. I mean, even when I came back from London for a visit, my sister that's closest to me got married very young. And I was
Mhm.
like, "Don't get married that young." And, I came back with this, because punk was still very big in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
And, I came back with this spiked hair and ripped jeans and Chelsea boots, and all my like, 5 of them just stared at me like, "What happened to you?" And they
That's
were like, "What did you do to your hair? What are you wearing?"
It's called punk, look it up.
Exactly. That was Billy Idol and what was his punk group before he became Billy Idol? I think it was called like Generation X or something. But yeah.
Oh, cool. I feel like that's an iconic time for, like, pop culture and history, style, all of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was glad to be a part of it.
So when you came back to America, you after being in the UK for 3 years, you got this punk look. What would you get into when you got came back?
I actually had to really mellow out and I felt
Yeah.
really stifled because I moved in with my sister because I really, didn't have any. where to go. I didn't have any
Mhm.
like job skills really at 21. So I just to get out of that little small town, I became a nanny, and
Mhm.
that, after 3 months, it was just a 3-month position just for the summer, but I just, I knew after 3 months, I was like, "Yeah, definitely don't wanna be a nanny." Um, it was just way too much responsibility with somebody else's child and
Mhm.
cleaning, and so I came back. That was in Connecticut, came back, um, to Wisconsin, and then, started, really just kinda bounced around, didn't really know what to do, and then I met, um, my soon to be husband at
Mhm.
22, and then we ended up getting married a year later. So I got married at 23, and then we moved to Kenosha, Wisconsin, which is right along the Illinois border.
Mhm.
Um, Ended up having 2 beautiful boys, and then
Oh.
unfortunately had divorced. And as soon as I got a chance, I one by one, all my siblings started moving to North Carolina, and
Oh.
finally, I was the last one to leave, and I left 6 years ago from Wisconsin, and then got to reunite with all my siblings in North Carolina.
So it seems like you have a close family, a pretty close knit.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we are very. We're all very, very different.
Mhm.
Um, we have different religious views, and we have different styles of parenting, but for the most part, I think we all love each other's sense of humor, and view all of each other as friends. We definitely,
Yeah.
how they say you can't pick your family, but you can pick your
Yeah.
friends. I think most of my family would also be my friends, even if we didn't know each other.
Oh, that's good. Were you raised that way, like to be very close and to like just support each other, or did it just work out that you all
I
really
think it just
clicked?
yeah, I think it just worked out as adults, because I don't think any of us were really I mean, my oldest sister was always very maternal. Um,
Mhm.
in fact, she stepped in, and she's only 9 years older than me, but she stepped in and did a lot of parental things just because my mom was too tired, and after
Mhm.
6 kids just didn't care towards the end.
Yeah.
So I think she was the one that, took me school shopping, and, to kind of fill in what my mom couldn't afford. And even though she wasn't necessarily rich herself, she always made sure that her little sisters never went without. So she was kind of
Oh,
the rock, um, amongst the whole family, because I think everybody landed in her house at one time or the other. Um,
oh, that's really sweet.
yeah, she's really, I mean, she's good to all of us. And then at some time, she's probably bailed us all out, whether it's,
Mhm.
from being stranded at, somebody's house where we shouldn't have been, or, my brother has always used her to bail him out of things, but she's always kind of been the rock of the family, the patriarch. And,
Mhm.
but now my brother, now he's 64, he's 10 years older than me. He's
Mhm.
kind of like now my paternal rock, when I need to bounce something off, that I need like the
Yeah.
opposite sex's point of view. So, I mean, I think all of someone, I think if you ask any of them who your best friend is, one of the siblings are going to say a sibling's name, you know,
Yeah. That's
um,
cool.
which is
That's
really
really
cool. Yeah.
lucky and fortunate. I don't think it always works out that way.
No, I don't think, I mean, when I talk to my friends, they're like, oh my God, I can't stand my brother or sister. Um, I mean, I don't think there's some that you're closer than others for sure. Um,
Yeah.
but you know, it's unusual for all of them to like everybody. There's
Mhm.
usually no drama amongst the 6 of us.
That's
But
cool.
I think that comes from when your parents are, you know, not to throw my parents underneath the bus, but when you have parents that aren't like super stable, or doing it right, I think siblings
Mhm.
end up being closer, because it's
Yeah.
it's kind of like becomes us against them.
Yeah. Well, will you tell me more about that? Like for growing up, growing into an adult, and then revisiting that relationship with your parents, especially like no parent does everything right. So especially when your parents like, there's some feedback of things they could have done better. How do you cope with that as an adult, and like how does that relationship with your parents look like then as an adult?
You know, I've one thing you do learn as an adult is that you kind of respect your parents', role in keeping you safe and fed and clothed. I think now I realize, my parents are products of their environment.
Hmm.
So I think how we get through it now is, which I like, is all of us siblings are all on the same page about our parents. We realize they're a little bit narcissist as far as, it's always about them. Um, but we've accepted it for what they are. And we realize, hey, we've got some, pretty amazing relationships amongst us siblings. So yeah, we didn't get the greatest, you know, parents in the parent department, but
Mhm.
I think somehow the siblings made up for it. We all made sure that we were at different times there for each other. Like none of us could ever go to our parents out of six of us. None of us have gone to our parents to bail us out for anything or to support us financially, materially, even emotionally. We've always gone to each other. Um, I think growing up, my mother as a single parent, it was, that's what she always said to us, don't bother me with a lot of stuff because I'm a single parent and I'm exhausted. We just kind of
Yeah.
accepted that as a fact. It wasn't until I became a parent where I thought, wait a minute, you can't say that to your kids. Your kids
Yeah.
doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if you're a single parent, because I became a single parent after my
Yeah.
divorce, and um, you don't care. In my mind, it was like, I don't care how tired I am. I'm going to go to that school play. I'm going to, go to that sporting event or the teacher conferences because that's what my kids need. So I rose to the challenge.
Right.
I didn't see that in my parents.
Right.
They were like, they were like, if we're tired, we're not
Uh-huh.
going. We're not doing that. They didn't see that need. Um, and I think for my mom, it's just being British. That just was never important to her parents. They only go to
Mhm.
school till they're 15, 16. Um, the working class, that's just this,
Mhm.
high school finishes at 16. And then it's only the, certain kids that go to uni or go, get their A levels and go past that. Um, so I just think that's kind of where her mindset was. She just was
Yeah.
like old school, when you turn 18, you leave the house and you figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
Um, and
I
so
wonder
that's
if
kind of,
some of that is
pardon?
is it some of that maybe a trauma response? I think like a lot of people struggle with narcissistic parents, but like you said, your mom grew up in World War I and like experienced having rations and things like that. So is some of that baked into it where it's like you've got to know how to take care of yourself?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, because like I just said, even though she was really young during World War II, it was still something that she was feeling years later because it took,
Mhm.
you know, decades for that to be rebuilt, right? And it was struggling financially for decades after, because Hitler bombed most of the city. Um,
Uh,
and so I think, one, she had that trauma, and two,
right.
she had her mother died giving birth to her. So she was actually raised
Oh
by
wow.
her paternal aunt, um, and didn't find that out until she was like 12. And it was
Mhm.
by like a little cousin who told her. And I think, and when I hear from my grandmother slash great aunt, how she responded, she wouldn't eat for a couple weeks. I think to make up for that, she, for my mom, kind of needed to be she needed to be like, I think they made her into a victim, like you're this special, adopted child. And I think from the trauma of that, the trauma of living in London, during rations, um, and her parents just trying to survive, right? In the lower socioeconomic part of London, East End of London. I think, yeah, there was a lot of baggage that she had that she never dealt with. And then she gets married at 19 to this American who, looks like, at the time, Elvis Presley. He looks just like Elvis Presley,
Uh-huh.
when he was in his 20s. And she just, like back then, again, because Britain was still reeling from the, war decades earlier. She said that American men were the only ones with cologne and they had candy. And she remembers being really impressed by his cologne and the fact that he always chewing gum and candy, which was kind of expensive in England. It was like a luxury. And here
Yeah.
these American soldiers had all that. So she just got, I think, wooed by his, boyish charm.
Yeah.
Um, and then taken to America where he, went on not to treat her very nice. And I think she was just kept getting traumatized, so she just wasn't
Mhm.
there for us emotionally, none of us. And then when you have six kids, four of them back to back, I mean, she always had two in diapers for, I think, 6 years, because the first four are just a year apart. like
Yeah.
literally, like, they're anywhere from 12 to 15 months apart. And then there's like a 5-year gap, and then there's me and my sister. So 6 kids, ranging from 1 to 10 is a lot, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then having a husband that wasn't, supportive. Um, and because he had a traumatic, his parents were, he I think at the he was ADHD, I think, and of course that was before anybody knew anything
Oh.
about ADHD. They didn't know
Mhm.
what to do with him, and so they sent him to live with his grandparents who were Norwegian and didn't speak any English because they had, um, could come over here from Norway. So he
Mhm.
kinda grew up by himself because he,
Yeah.
was with these grandparents that didn't speak any English. Um, and they were in Milwaukee in a Norwegian community, so they never really even needed to speak English because they all spoke
Yeah.
with each other Norwegian. Um, and so both of them, you had these 2 traumatized children probably getting married and
Yeah.
having 6 kids, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't you shouldn't have that many kids in the first place when you're traumatized, but nobody got therapy back then.
Right. Or even
Um,
realizes that they are traumatized until it like
exactly.
shows up in through their kids.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's why we all formed such a close bond, because we
Mhm.
were like, okay, these people are a little on the crazy side,
Yeah.
So we got to turn to each other, and we always have. Like to this day, when there's any problems in our life, whether there's a child that's sick, or there's parenting issues, or there's a divorce, the first people we call is each other. We never call our
Mm.
parents, which is unusual. Because when I look at kids that call their parents, it's like, wow, I wonder what that must be like, but then
Yeah.
I have my siblings, so I can't really complain.
How do you think that's influenced your relationships and your way of parenting?
Well, I did everything opposite of what my mom did, so
Mhm.
I gave my kids, clear decisions of they needed to do something after high school. I said,
Mhm.
"It doesn't have to be university, but it has to be something."
Mhm.
Um, so, my child just did a boot camp, and he's a, software engineer.
Oh wow.
And Liam is, he's gonna go to school for personal training. He's only 20. So I'm always trying to give them something like you gotta have something attainable that you can market. You can't just wing it.
Yeah.
I made sure I spent lots of time with them. Like anything that was important to them, was important to me. So whether it was
Yeah.
a school play or, Max was in tennis and, um, Liam played the sax. I always made sure that I was always at those functions.
Mhm.
Even if they weren't going to last for a long time, I just wanted to always support them and say, hey, this is important to me. Um, so I think that's how it affected me. I thought, okay, this is what, and I did, because my mom did move us around a lot. Um,
Mhm.
but I love that she gave me the gift to travel because once I turned 18 and moved to England, I traveled all over. I traveled to Greece and
Mhm.
Belgium and France and on my own. And um, that was my graduation gift to each of my kids was,
Oh nice.
an international place of their choice. Um, so that was really important for me to institute travel. And I married, a Nigerian man, so the boys got to travel back and forth to Nigeria quite a bit. Um,
Cool.
so I think that opened my eyes up too, living in a very cosmopolitan city. I got to know, I mean, when you're from Lake Mills, Wisconsin, I mean, the only kids you get to know are white kids,
Yeah.
that's it. And then when you go to London and you meet people from all over the world, especially because England, has colonized so many countries,
Yeah.
that there's so many different ethnicities over in London. I got to just to meet, I mean, I didn't even know, I remember that I was embarrassed, but I didn't even know that there was a country called Albania. I don't know how my school let me down, but I met this Albanian. I'm like, "Where is that?" I was 18 years old. It's like, "What? You don't know where Albania is?" I'm like, "No." But I got to realize, I got to learn about Yugoslavia and how it's, made up of Croatia. Now it's, obviously
Yeah.
formed. But I learned so much over in England, about geography and people and their
Yeah.
culture and Jamaicans are so different from Trinidadians and, Haitians are different, and it was so exciting to, see all these different countries, representing from Africa that
Right.
and that's how I, because I had so many Nigerian friends, it was very easy when I met my husband that it's like, "Oh, Nigerian." I knew so much about his country
Mhm.
the food already because I had so many friends that were Nigerian. And so I think he was shocked because he was over here for college, and I think he was shocked to
Oh,
realize an American knew so much about Nigeria, so that was our
yeah.
connecting. But that was one thing I can say my mother gifted me was the love of travel and what travel brings. It brings such an incredible education that you do not get in school.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And like growing up in America, it can be such a bubble that you don't realize what else is out there.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
you traveled, you did solo traveling way before iPhones, no Google Maps, nothing like that. Were you ever afraid? Like, how did you feel comfortable and confident doing that?
Honestly, it's so weird that you say that because now I can't even function without my phone. I don't even like to go to the
Yeah.
grocery store without having GPS. I remember literally when I was interviewing, when I was living in London and they would tell you, all they would tell you is where the nearest subway was. And then you would have to figure out by just going down the underground and looking at all the maps. You have, okay,
Yeah.
how do I get to, Black Horse Road to Charing Cross, and you had to figure out all the places where you had to get out and swap trains. So a lot of that's trial and error, right? You always have to leave two
Yeah.
hours before an appointment because you didn't know which part of London you were going to end up on if you didn't get off at the right subway. Um, and when I went to France and stuff, that again, yeah, you don't honestly, I don't even I never remember feeling scared, which I think is part
Yeah.
of being young. Um, because now, even when I travel internationally now, I have my iPhone, right? You can punch in a place, it'll tell you exactly what underground to get, what
Mhm.
bus to get. I think you just stopped and asked people, and British people I think are pretty sweet. So they, when they heard a young American voice, they were always eager to point you to the right direction of where you should be. My
Mhm.
uncle was a cabbie, a black cabbie.
Mhm.
So I would often call him and say, "How do I get there?" And he would tell me exactly which streets, and you would write it down with pen and paper. You take a right here,
Yeah.
left here, and there'll be a fish shop on the corner. Take a right there,
Yeah.
and you took pen and paper and you wrote down everything they said, and then you followed it. You know,
I
um,
think that the asking for directions is something that doesn't happen as much anymore, especially with young people. And so many people are afraid of predators or everything like that. So it's like I don't want to like let on that I'm traveling alone and ask for directions.
that
What
is so
sort of
true.
yeah, I lived in New York just before iPhones and I don't know how I did it and how I got around and figured it out, but you do just end up figuring it out and you're fine. But looking back at it, I'm like, I wouldn't wanna do that now knowing that that I have the directions, like, so easily in my pocket.
That's
But
right, and things have
I
gotten more
wanna
dangerous too.
well, yeah, like, and that's what I wonder, have things gotten more dangerous, or are we just more aware of it because
No, I
we
think they
have
have.
all this access?
I think things are
Yeah.
much more volatile than they are. People are so divided. If you don't share the same opinion with somebody, now it becomes argumentative
Yeah.
and I just don't think that was like that when I was 18. I mean, people kept their opinions pretty much to themselves. I mean, they always said never talk about religion and politics. And for the most part, I don't
Right.
remember ever doing that. Just always learning from people. And people were so sweet and wanting to help. Um,
Yeah.
I just don't
Do
think you
you
can
feel
have
like
that.
the connections now that everything is so open, like ideas, opinions are more open, which creates more divide. But do you feel like that there's the ability to create deeper connections with people because of that?
Hmm. No, I think it's gotten worse. I think,
Yeah,
yeah, I feel like things, the connections, especially during COVID, I think that I swear people went crazy during COVID
yeah,
because it seemed like everything fell in a handbasket after COVID or during COVID and after. Um,
hmm,
I find people more disconnected now. It harder to like when you ask questions like what we're doing right now. I think some
hmm,
people get really offended. They're like, "Why are you asking me these personal questions?" Um, I think
yeah.
everybody wants their story told. I just don't think too many people stop and ask. Um,
Right.
I don't
And
think
even
people
the
are
stopping and
serious.
asking is can be invasive if
Exactly, and I
yeah.
think some of it's because people are scared to speak their mind because it is so divisive. It's like if they don't agree with A, B, or C, they're going to get hostile. They're gonna ask me, and some people just are not wanting to deal with that. Where I feel like before you could have an honest conversation with somebody, um, and it would be okay if things were different, if you didn't agree.
Right. That's
You know?
interesting. That's a lot to think about.
Yeah, it is.
I wanted to ask you about I'm gonna mull on that, but I wanted to ask you about solo travel and especially with you doing it at such a young age, what advice do you have from that experience to people who maybe want to and are afraid to, or don't want to do it by themselves and like would want to do it in a group vacation as opposed to on their own? Like what sort of what did you learn about yourself through all of that solo traveling experience?
It's crazy. I was more confident then at 18 when I knew nothing,
Hmm.
um, than I am now. I mean, I don't know if I'd be so quick to solo travel now. I mean, I like having somebody a witness to my adventure. I want,
Hmm.
me to have that collaboration. I don't enjoy solo traveling anymore now that I'm in my 50s. You think I would, but at 18, 19, I think you you don't think of any of you just which is not a good thing either, right? You don't think of any of the hazards because you've got your whole life ahead of you and you don't think negatively, you think only positive. So I say solo travel, when I went to France for the first time, it was to meet my high school pen pal. So I was meeting
Oh,
somebody.
cool.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
my nan, my grandmother, she was, freaking out because she's like, how can you go to France? I won't have any way of getting a hold of you. Um, and we don't know if this girl's, a psycho. She could be, you could have been writing to a pedophile this whole time.
Right. Yeah.
And I looked at her like, you're insane. Well, of course not. I would have known if I was talking to a pedophile for 4 years, because it was all through high
Yeah.
school. And I said, we sent pictures back and forth. It never even entered my mind, probably because I was from such a small little town where nothing bad happened. So I
Hmm.
assumed the whole world was like that. So maybe I just lucked out, but I went to France and met her and she was, super hospitable and so was her family. And then when I went to Greece, I did travel with my cousin. Um,
Hmm.
but she was very young too, but we never thought like we were gonna get in trouble. We just got on a flight. There was a connecting, there was a bus that took you to your villa and it parked way up in the mountains because we went to Lindos, roads, and there was no cars in the actual village. So you had to walk down with your luggage all the way down this steep hill. We never thought like is this guide good? I mean, is this
Right.
person that's taking us to our hotel, is he gonna kill us? I mean, now you hear of, what is that called? Trafficking now, of these young
Yeah.
girls. I mean, I think we're always pretty astute at a young age. I mean, again, I was sheltered to a degree, like you said, sheltered being an American, period, and then I'm from a
Hmm.
small town. Um, but you're still astute. You're looking around at all times. We didn't get into cars with strange people or share cabs or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I would say it is nowadays. I wouldn't trust anyone to travel by themselves, not even a male. I just think there always needs to be a witness of who you are and where you are, and someone to um, at least give you a description of who you are if you've gone
Yeah.
missing.
Yeah. 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 Did
Um,
you ever have an experience where you kind of went in naive or blind and it was a little shady?
yeah, there was these one time I got myself into a situation. I was in London and it was my roommate and she left. I had a little purse with and again, because no cell phones, she had my travel card where you bought it for a month and then you could jump on buses and use it on subways. And I had that and all my money and my ID in a little wallet. And I said, "Hey, can you put this in your purse?" Because we went to nightclub. And she
Hmm.
just left and went home and didn't tell me, and then took my wallet with me. Well, it got to be about 2 in the morning where all this, the subways stop running around 11, and
Uh-huh.
the buses get really like far in between, like 2 hours apart, after
Yeah.
midnight. And
Yeah.
I lived on not the greatest part of London, and I was downtown London, and I had no coins or anything because that was when we had, payphones. So I couldn't even call my brother,
Oh,
and
yeah.
not that he could have helped me anyway because he didn't have a car. Because when you live in London, nobody has cars. You just
Uh-huh.
use public transportation because it's so amazing. And so I had no way to get on a bus. I had no way to call him because I had no coins, no nothing. And I didn't realize I was stranded until, like everybody was walking out of the nightclub. And I had to take a ride with these two guys, and my gut told me don't do it, but it's like I don't know.
Mm.
They were working at the Savoy, and they had American accents, so I thought, oh, I should be okay. They're American, um, and we were driving. They were giving me a ride home, and he turned to me and he's like, basically said, what do I get for taking you home?
Oh.
And I was like, I can pay you later. I just don't have a wallet right now. And I said, I see at the Savoy every day. He was some kind of contractor,
Uh-huh.
but his friend was driving in the front and we were in the back seat. And he told his friend, just turn up the music and give us some privacy. And I thought, oh boy, what's going to happen here?
Oh.
So I just said, look, if you think you're going to get anything other than, money later, I'm like, I am not one to submit to doing anything. And I said, I will go to the American embassy. I will go to the police. So don't
Yeah.
even try. I mean, I got really mouthy. I'm like, I was like, you're going to have to kill me. That's all I'm going to say, because I'm not going, I'm not going down easy. And then he backed away. But I think if I was, one of those girls that could be intimidated easily, I think that could have
Mhm.
definitely been a case of like a date rape situation where
Scary thing.
you go with somebody thinking you're going to be okay. And he definitely was considering, trying to intimidate me into sex. That's for sure.
Mhm.
Um, but I was grown. One thing when you have two brothers and you're the baby and you do get, you know, picked on, as much as they love me, they
Mhm.
still picked on me and toughened me up. And I thought, yeah, I mean, my brothers always said, if anybody ever, tries to force some stuff on you, they said, they said, you got to fight like crazy. And
Yeah.
that was always in my head, like, okay, if this is what they're talking about, I'm not going down easy.
Ready to go. Yeah.
I'm ready to go. That was probably the scariest. And this other time, in the subway, I was coming back from a late shift at the Savoy Hotel. It was like a 3 to 11. So I was on the last subway, which always was sketchy,
Mhm.
at night. And I think he was mentally ill, but he definitely was trying to intimidate me. And the last bus, I was at the last station to get off, and it wasn't very well lit. And he looked like the Joker. He had like weird makeup on
Oh.
and just he was acting erratic. His hair was erratic, and everywhere I sat, he would sit right next to me. And I didn't realize it, but a woman was observing him, and I would just get up and then sit back down, because I every time I wanted to get up to go like it was my stop to kind of trick him, he'd get up with me and like he was going to follow me. And so
Mm.
it was the second to the last stop, and the doors open, and I stayed sitting. And he had a bunch of keys on him. I remembered because it was rattling and making noise. And so the doors opened up, and they were about to close. And then I ran through them, hoping he would get caught, but he was able to get through too. And I started running, and I could hear his keys jangling
Oh.
really fast, like he was definitely behind me. And then all of a sudden, this woman that was very tall and very poised and confident, she grabs me and starts yelling at him and says, "Leave her alone," and then he got
Mhm.
intimidated by her, and he went back into slid back into the subway station. That was probably the other really time. And there was starting to get a couple of different things where it's just like, I suppose, living in New York, you get these crazies that
Yeah.
do very strange things on the subway. I think all of that was getting to me where I felt like I need to go home and connect. Just living in a big city, things
Yeah.
like that happen a lot, and it was starting to really wear on me, you
Yes.
know.
Because like yes, you're comfortable setting boundaries and communicating them, but it's not you don't want to have to be on guard all the time.
And I very good, and I that's a very good point. I found myself being on guard all the time. Like
Yeah.
the city starts to harden you. and
Yes,
I
yeah.
didn't like that.
That's good. That's like a lot of self-awareness too, because I think some people just harden up and like think that that's life.
Right, and I just didn't wanna be like that, so I was like, "You know what? I wanna go back home where things are normal and quiet," and I started appreciating that instead of hating it.
I was having a conversation with someone else about strength and like the strength that we develop, but also like strength being able to be vulnerable and like wanting to be able to be soft and like not have to be on guard or have our guards up. Like, do you feel like that's something you experience like living in big cities and having like crazy people around you, but all and then getting to go back to a small town and that you're familiar with and like have the just more comfort of I guess a less dense population.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I missed the diversity, of course, I missed all the
Mhm.
different cuisines and restaurants, um, and I missed there is something about London when you walk into a pub, it's very, it's not a bar scene, you can go and get a sandwich and chit chat to everybody, that's
Mhm.
around you. It's a very when you see that on movies, that is really true. It's very neighborly. Um, but that's only once in a while, for the most part, kind of like you said with New York, there's the crazies driving the subways and the crazy driving when you're trying to cross the street. Um, and you do become a little bit jaded for survival, but like you said, if you don't want that and you miss that soft side of you and that trusting side, that's what I think I was yearning for. But I think I even came back a better person because now I was more empathetic to foreigners. When I'd see somebody that couldn't speak the language or had a heavy accent, I knew what that felt like,
Mhm.
being different. And so I think I came back much more empathetic of, um, anybody that, is an American, that's trying
Yeah.
to, make it here. And I also came back a little bit more aware. I wasn't so naive. Like I remember a homeless person trying, we were in Milwaukee, which is a big city, but nothing like, London. And this guy was trying to get money off my sister. And I'm the little sister. And I was like,
Mhm.
had this confidence to yell at him, "Hey, what are you talking to my sister for?" And he's like, "I'm trying to get some, money." And I'm like, I could tell he was just, trying to get some money off her. The story
Yeah.
didn't jive up to how he looked. And I'm like, "I'm sorry you're in that situation, but that sounds like a you problem." And
Yeah.
when we got back in the car, she was like, "That was so heartless." And I'm like, "No, he was just trying to get money from you. He's not really stuck
Right.
here. I mean, did you see how expensive his shoes were? And
Yeah.
his hair was really tightly groomed." I'm like, "No, that he's just trying to get money from you." And she's like, "Oh, you're so jaded." I'm like, "No, it's called, r- real is like realty or realist. No, what am I trying to say?
Being
Realistic. Thank
realistic.
you." I'm like, "No, that's
Yeah.
just realistic." But I remember thinking, that was from London, just living in a big
Yeah.
city and seeing it happen and being taken for money. Um,
Yeah.
it's like you just come back a stronger, better person. But yes, also appreciative of what you left behind and more empathetic, you know?
Yeah. And I feel like I'm someone who will him and haw and like I don't want to give money every time, especially if there's lots of homeless people around, but feel guilty and I like my people pleaser comes out and I'm still working even in like friendships, relationships, I'm still working on being able to say no. So like do you have advice for people who struggle saying no even when they want to?
You know what? I think the more you get confident with yourself, the
Mhm.
more you love yourself and realize, "Hey, I'm a really good person." I think you actually create better boundaries.
Mhm.
I think when people have problems with boundaries, the first thing they should look at is, do I have good dialogue with myself? Do I love myself?
Mhm.
Um, and if you don't, that's probably why, because you're putting other people's needs before yours.
Right.
And that is not that's going to drain you dry where you're not going to be there
Yeah.
for anybody then. So I think that's what advice I would say is like if you really want to be good to the people around you, then take care of yourself so that you last longer. Um,
Right.
kind of like that golden goose, take care of the goose so that it can keep producing the golden eggs. You are that golden goose, so take care of
Mhm.
yourself first so that you can continue to taking care of people. Um, even a homeless person, it's like if you keep giving all your money away, you're not going to have enough for the people that you really love that might need you, right?
Right.
Um, And you got to say to yourself, you know what? There is so many resources in this country. If somebody really wanted to get help, they could tap into a lot of resources, you know?
Right. Yeah, like
Um,
our cup can runneth over, but if we're just pouring out, it will eventually be empty.
right. So there's things you can do,
And
you
that's
know,
not good.
can
Yeah.
I, ask a homeless person, do you know of the local resources? Do you know the shelters? You know,
Mhm.
there's things you could do, maybe look up on your phone for them. But I think most people, are homeless due to mental illness, unfortunately, or drug addiction. I think there's very few people that are just hit on hard times, you know,
Yeah. And are
and
you able to have those sort of boundaries with people like friends, people who are just maybe not even money, but like draining energy from you?
yes,
Like, are you,
and that took a
yeah.
long time. And that's one thing about being in your 40s and 50s that you start caring less what people think of you. So I don't know if it comes with just caring less or confidence,
Mhm.
but I've definitely been able to put boundaries up the last 10 years that I'd never been able to put up before. So when I find
Yeah.
somebody that's draining me and they don't fulfill me at all, like in any way, like they don't fill up my love tank in any
Mhm.
way, then I limit my association with them. I don't care if I offend them by saying, sorry, not tonight, you know?
Yeah. And do you feel like you have to communicate like, "Hey, like you're really draining my energy, maybe work on yourself and like stop like stop draining me and like being so negative?" Or do you just say no, like not going, no explanation?
I don't give an explanation because I feel like if they really want to know, like if you say no to them 3 times, if they
Mhm.
really wanted to know, they'd say, "How come you never want to hang out with me?" Then I would
Right.
say it, right? But
Yeah.
I think most people don't they don't care. Do you know what I mean? They don't care what you think.
Yeah.
So the ones that do care, they'll ask and you're gonna give an opportunity. But I don't waste energy on telling somebody, one, I don't love confrontation. I mean, I don't run from it, but I
Mhm.
don't love it. Um, so if you care enough that I'm not with you, you're gonna ask, like, why don't you ever take me up on these invitations? And then I can say, you know what? I find your company draining. I
Yeah.
mean, I did say that recently to somebody. She did care enough to ask, and I said, "You're so negative," and I have a propensity to be negative. So when
Mhm.
I'm around you and you're only talking about yourself constantly, I try to interject and change the subject, and you bring it right back to yourself. It
Mm.
gets exhausting. And she was like, "Really? I do that?" I'm like, "Yeah, you really do." And she the very next time we were together, she did the same thing. So I thought, you know what?
Oh, not
She got a
changing.
little bit better. She tried to ask me a few questions, but in the end, it went
Mhm.
right back to her. And I thought, yeah, see, people, if they want to change, they will, right?
Right. And
Um,
some it helps to like have someone willing to tell you and be honest.
yes. And I think if you ask somebody, if you're ready for a frank conversation, they're going to ask you, and you should give it to them. But most
Yeah.
people aren't prepared to hear anything negative.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've connected through the Jay Shetty Coaching School, and you're either a life coach or studying to be a life coach. What brought you into life coaching? Have you had a life coach before?
No, actually, I never have. It was the interesting thing. So I am in real estate right now, and
Mhm.
it's a very thankless job. Um,
Mm.
when anytime you're 100% commission, you get that kind of people think of you as like a car salesman.
Mm.
You don't get a lot of respect. People don't value for the professionalism that you bring into the. I mean, it's really important to have an agent, whether it's listing side or
Mhm.
buying side. I mean, if they're good, they can really save you a lot of money and, get the best deal for you. And I just don't think people appreciate it. I think they just think you're showing them houses. They don't realize all the
Right.
negotiation that goes on. And I started getting to the stage, I was like, whew, after 17 years of being a real estate agent, 7 days a week, I just realized it had nothing to do with money, that I just wasn't being fulfilled. So I was trying to think of a career. What would I want to do? And it actually came on as I always wanted to be a marriage counselor because I realized, through my divorce and seeing others' divorces that, the biggest problem is people just don't communicate, and it's just starts
Mhm.
most all divorces end up from a communication issue, because even if it's
Mhm.
a adultery and affair, it's because two people weren't talking intimately about intimate things.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking, God, if people could save marriages, they could save families, right? I
Right.
could have been a better kid for it. My kids could have been better for it. And so I always wanted to be a marriage counselor. And I thought, I can't go to college now at 50, start all over. And then I've always liked Jay Shetty, and he had on this, it was a relationship coach on one of his
Mm.
podcasts. And I was like, coach? I was like, what is a relationship coach?
Mhm.
And I'm sorry to back up. Before that, I was having brunch with a friend, and there was this young couple that were fighting at the table, and these tables were close to each other.
Yeah.
And I was mesmerized by I was so like, oh my God, if I could just interject. I wanted so badly to interject and just say, because the wife was interrupting. She was very articulate, and she could pick her words really well, and he wasn't.
Mhm.
And so he was getting frustrated. He kept getting up and walking away right past our table, like constantly. And I could hear the whole conversation. And my friend said, "What do you care? What some random couple is arguing about?" I'm like, because I can see he's getting frustrated, and she's not letting them speak. And if I could just, referee them. And she's like, "Why would you
Yeah.
want to?" And I said, "Because they're such a nice young couple, and they've got this kid,
Yeah.
in a stroller." And I'm like, "He's too young for them to
Oh.
be divorced." Because they were talking about it. She's like, "Well, maybe we should just get divorced." And I was like, "No."
Oh.
And and I remember they stuck in my head. I was thinking, how are they doing? Did they get help? Are they together? And I just kept thinking about them. And then all of a sudden, this Jay Shetty podcast comes on, and he has this relationship coach. And I'm like, well, what
Mhm.
does the coach do? And then I looked, and it was just a certification. And then I realized, then I just by Googling, Jay Shetty had his program. And I was like, now
Mhm.
that is something I could get on board with. So even if,
Yeah.
my boss said, a broker in charge, she's like, you're never going to make the money you make now. And I'm like, it's not even about money. It's about self-fulfillment,
Right.
having it matter what I do, you know? I was like, I want to make a difference in somebody else's life. That I can't do that in real estate. Even if I
Yeah.
save them 10 grand on my great negotiation skills, they're not going to think about that a week later, that.
Right.
So I was like, I want to make a lasting impact. I want to do something. So I was kind of going into it as a relationship coach, but I don't know now, what my niche will be.
Yeah.
I just love the process, and I love learning, and I think I'm really excited to be a life coach.
Have you gotten any coaching tips for yourself? Has it changed you just even learning about how to be a coach?
Yeah, I mean, just actively listening and being curious. Now, I naturally am curious, like even hearing your podcast, I like, what a cool idea. I am
Uh-huh.
curious to hear about other people's story. Um,
Mhm.
so it's helped me be a better listener. I mean, the biggest thing I'm struggling with is, because I try to be a problem solver, is realizing that coaching is not about the problem at all. It's not. You don't coach, you coach the person, you don't coach the thing.
Mhm.
And that has
Right.
been the biggest struggle for me. Because always trying to solve somebody's problems. How can I make your life
Yeah.
easier? Um, and so that's been the biggest thing. So I've become a better listener. So when people are,
Mhm.
even my children, when they approach me with a problem, I'm not so quick to try to give them a solution. Um,
Right.
I'm better at keep asking questions to see if they can come figure it out themselves. So I think it's definitely made me a better parent.
That's
Um,
cool.
yeah, and that's worth the money right there.
Yeah. Well, I like what you're saying about the communication and relationships because I'm hearing from your other stories that you are very communicative and like able to like speak your mind, speak your boundaries. What what do you think you have to offer for people who are struggling in a relationship or needing that guidance, that like self, even if the self-awareness of how they can be better communicators, how can they show up more fully in their relationship?
Just, I think the biggest thing I've learned is, throughout my own experience in this course, is just being ridiculously honest with your mate. I mean,
Mhm.
even if it's going to hurt, and being vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable to have close relationships. You got to let somebody know, you hurt my feelings when you said that. Even if I am being too sensitive, I just want to let you know that hurt, or that embarrassed me. I think so many people are trying to save face all the time, that they don't let
Yeah.
the people they know, around them, love them, that they are hurt, or they were embarrassed,
Mhm.
or they felt insecure. Um,
Mhm.
that people try to get away with not saying that, and then they try to come in through the back door, which just confuses people because you're like, why are you mad at me? I don't understand. Instead of being
Yeah.
honest, they make up something to protect their vulnerability. So I think
Right.
if you can't be vulnerable, I don't think you should be in any relationship, right? Not, I mean,
Right.
you've got to be vulnerable if you're going to be in a relationship. I always tell my boys that, when they try to act bravado and prideful, I always say,
Yeah.
then don't bother dating because I said love is only for the brave. You
Yeah.
can be brave and vulnerable.
And it's not easy to be vulnerable, and it definitely takes practice and like sitting in that discomfort, that initial discomfort that comes with it, I think.
That's true. But I think that goes back to confidence too.
Mhm.
You've got to love yourself with all of your flaws. You got to have fantastic dialogue with yourself. Um, because if you can't love
Yeah.
yourself, you cannot love anyone else.
Yeah. And it's like once you really love yourself and have that appreciation, you want to do the things that will be like benefit you and enhance your life. You don't want to hold in grudges or hurt that just like stays in you and kind of eats you alive from the inside out.
Exactly. Yep. Because it's people who
Yeah.
hold grudges that usually are, it's pride, right? They
Right.
usually have self-loathing to some degree, else they wouldn't be so prideful.
Right.
Because I think prideful people usually are insecure people.
Yeah. It definitely takes practice.
It does.
Practice through experience.
Yeah, it does. And just not take life too seriously. It's like
Yeah.
you will survive this. You will overcome anything. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? You get embarrassed. You'll survive that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not the end of the world. It's not life or death.
No.
So, what final words of wisdom would you have for someone listening to your story, um, and maybe is in a small town now and is curious about leaving, or isn't in a relationship but really wants to be in one, or is maybe parenting? Anything that you've learned from your experience in this life that you want to share?
Oh, wow. With parenting, I think you have to forgive yourself. I think so many of us parents um, live with regret, and you can't parent with regret, and you can't parent with fear. So you just have to always be forgiving with yourself. And I think one thing, like Jay Shetty's course has taught me, is be curious. I mean, even your podcast is you're being curious of other people's lives.
Mhm.
That's a really cool attribute because people are drawn to people that are curious and interested in other people. And I think the more questions you can ask of other people, the the more education you're going to get, and you're going to be more likable, right? Because people like people that have a personal interest. So I think
Right.
if people are lonely, as long as you have a personal interest, you can overcome loneliness. You can overcome being alone in a big city. Just be interested in the people around you, in the culture around you, and
Mm.
ask tons of questions. And I think you will be able to fit in anywhere you move.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I really can't wait to be able to share it.
Thank you, Courtney. I really had a good time, and
Yeah.
thanks for being so interested in another person.
Thank you for joining us today. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and join us in our next conversation where we'll be exploring the extraordinary lives of ordinary people. I'm Courtney Lofton, and this is Ordinary Eccentrics.